called and also sent me an email indicating that she was out last night and got a hold of some food that really made her sick. And so she is not able to be here because of that. We know her, she is very dedicated. She would not have not been here except for that. And she just said, I'll try to make it, but I'm really feeling very badly. But in a way, I'm glad we have President Sadiq Wai here. We have Esmeralda Brown here. And I do want to take, and Imam Tyler, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you do the benediction and do the tribute that way. I'm okay. Working on my feet here. Because I do think we should spend a minute still talking about the UN decade, because we are in the UN decade of people of African descent. That's right. And it's an important opportunity, you know, to deal with some of the issues that have just been raised. So I didn't indicate in advance that I was going to ask you to do this, but if you would say a word about it, because I know you do a lot of work at the United Nations, and Sister Esmeralda Brown does, and we'll permit you to do so as well. Go right ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think at this juncture, let me defer to Sister Esmeralda Brown, because she's an NGO. An NGO means she's accredited to the UN, a non-governmental organization. So she's been working on a lot of these issues. We work on the policy side, but she works on getting things done. So, Dr. Brown, I'll let you take, and then I'll check in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does anyone know about the decade?
Assume we don't. Just assume we don't. Let's assume we don't, and just give us your presentation. That's the best way to go.
The reason I have asked is because last year, January 1st, the United Nations declared the International Decade of Peoples of African Descent, which began last year and is going to go on for the next 10 years, 2029. And it is felt that everybody knows about it around the world, and most people doesn't know about it. This decade has a theme of recognition, dignity, and development for people of African descent. It began last year, and there are mandates for government to implement, what civil society also should implement, and the United Nations. It's a decade that is also been managed at the United Nations level through an expert group that they are still trying to look at program of action and so forth. But you also have the high level, the Human Rights High Level Commission that are also in the seem to be in competition. They are in Geneva. What NGOs or non-governmental organizations are trying to do is to decipher what to really do. As someone who has worked with the decade of the indigenous peoples, they had 2 decades, 20 years, and it failed. I felt, and while David Stewart and many of the brothers and sisters from around the world, that for the first time in our history, after 500 plus years, an international body like the United Nations recognize that we are people to also deal with. I do not think that they might have said, well, we're just letting them feel good. The indigenous decade didn't work well, so African people will not, you know, we will include them also, but they will not do anything. What some of us are trying to do is that we go into communities. I do a lot of work in Central, I'm from Panama, I'm from Central America, and the Caribbean, and I try to go to the folks to find out what are they doing. They really don't know about it, so the community doesn't. But here in the United States, they also do not know about it. The UN has a subcommittee, and I wish Sister Doherty was here, because she's very, I think she's a co-chair of that subcommittee, that on the decade, and that they are trying to do things, but it's events and so forth, and that I don't feel that it's really benefiting what we're doing. I know, for instance, that the decade, that mechanism represents the establishment of an organized, ongoing space for us and give us an audience on issues pertaining to people of African descent, because it's a big thing. But it's just in word. We need to let it happen. It needs to happen. Some folks, like I was supposed to be in Colombia right now, Colombia, South America, because the communities of African descent, they realize that if they don't do something, governments are passing very good laws and resolutions and so forth. I'll give you a good example. My government in Panama has had a fantastic program for people of African descent. But they refuse to have a ministry or a secretariat addressing the issue of Africa, because they do not want to touch the issue of racism, which is the order of the day in Latin America and the Caribbean. Brazil is one of the few countries that, as you know, there were extreme racism there, and it seems like they're going to be the ones, because people of African descent there, the black Brazilians, are really forcing not only the government, but they're doing for themselves. So, given the experience that the indigenous people had, that nothing did happen for them, and they were so frustrated, and they asked the UN for another decade. The UN said, no, we're not going to give you another 10 years. But our decade is here. We need to maybe come up with what we want to do in our communities. Sitting here, I said, my God, but when we were in South Africa in 2001 for the conference against racism, we dealt with all of this. And it wasn't only in the United States. All of our regions in the world, even blacks in Europe. In fact, it was sometimes, I was coming out of my eyes to see that they still deal with people from Africa, from the continent directly, as if they are not human. Even the NGOs, no respect for Africans. And we spent some time there, and I kept saying, like, my God, this is very serious. So how do we take on this decade? Like, we have the sister that, you know, she's wonderful because she is from the Caribbean, and she's part of organizing, coordinating the work of the decade, and she's creating consciousness, part of the work that she's doing, with Caribbean governments, the Caribbean having the consciousness of, you know, unless there are people from African descent, this decade will not take place. It will just be, oh, they had this event, there's this and the other. But all of the issues here, were anyone able to go to Chile, maybe in 2000, when the regional had to meet, and the United States and Latin America and the Caribbean met. And that's where everybody discovered, like, wow, even in Chile we had black folks. They told us that Chile didn't have black, you know? And we talk about the issues, and all the issues are the same. So I share this to say that the more that we think that there are changes, or we, you know, the issues are still there. So maybe PAUD needs to, we need to say what we need to do and what we're going to do for ourselves. When the Pope was here, and this is going to be my last part, when the Pope came in September of last year, I am sitting there on the computer, and I'm hearing, you know, the TV, that the Pope is going to speak at the UN. And I said, oh my God, I need to send him a pager letting him know that in whatever presentation he's going to make, he better say something about the decade. So I called his office at the UN, and they said, well, yeah, a statement is already made. I said, yeah, but sometimes he gets off also. He can't say whatever he wants. So I wrote something for reminding him the role of the church, you know, with people of African descent. How Bartolomé de las Casas, they went to what he said about us, you know, and therefore he needs to say something to that effect. So I called their office and I sent them the letter to him. And I waited there to hear what he was going to say. He didn't touch it, but I will follow up with him because he's from Argentina, and I know I have ways to get to him. So I said all of this to say that we have brothers and sisters, we have work to do. do.
Yes.
And we're not going to wait for government. We're not going to wait. We have work to do with our, so everything that we are doing, put it within that context. This is for the dignity of our people. This is for development. This is for recognition. And people in Latin America, especially Colombia, they're really looking towards us, you know. So I think maybe I should end it because I know my brother has something to
There's
say.
just one thing, a couple of things I wanted to add. I think Dr. Brown has really stated it. But I just want to give you two simple examples that is going to blow your mind. When they wanted to erect the slave memorial at the UN, the African countries stated, and by the way, I have to give credit to Jamaica, West Indies. The African leaders said, don't do this, it's going to open up this whole question of slavery. Jamaica stubbornly and valiantly said, if they, Jewish people, other communities could say never again.
That's right.
If we are going to fight to the end of this war, we are going to do it, and Jamaica made it possible to having that our memorial at the UN grounds. You need to give them a big round of applause. And the second thing is, NGOs, of course, non-governmental organizations, we don't vote, but we do influence certain policies at the UN. In fact, now, the President of the UN General Assembly sends out invitations to civil society leaders to come and address the UN. But again, it's by, of course, Dr. Stewart and Dr. Brown, they know that. It's also very political. So perhaps maybe what we need to do as POET is really pick someone and then fill out an application and say, we want somebody to go and address the world on things that matter to us.
Yes.
And that is not, they're putting out the invitation. So it's not just filling it out, but there's going to be also a groundswell of support, maybe a petition signed to saying that, you know, like what is happening here, it really is phenomenal. And perhaps, just maybe perhaps with Dr. Stewart and Dr. Support, maybe perhaps we need to start bringing some of these key policy makers to meetings like this. Because the only way they're going to feel that this is serious business
Yes.
is for them to come and see who's at the table. And some of them really want to get to reaching out to them because there are some of them who have been there for 30, 40 years. They have never, ever had the opportunity to speak to this kind of an audience.
Yes.
Okay, here and yes.
Hi, so very quickly I wanted to add to what you shared.